What's up, y'all? I'm Gabe, and this is my review for Warrior and all three of its seasons. Now, there's only a tiny bit of spoilers for Season 1 and 2, just because without it, it'd be a bit difficult to discuss, but none for Season 3, because that just came out, and it's fantastic, and definitely worth the watch. And man, I really love this show. Ever since I watched the Raid series and the Ip Man movies, I've been like a drug addict, looking for my martial arts fixed. And the problem with a lot of movies and TV shows nowadays is they focus too much on making the fights end quickly by making the protagonist overpowered because they don't have the budget to actually train people for the movie and then simulate realistic fight scenes until they get the clip necessary for the movie. Or a lot of the times they just don't feel like working and it's the same dude creating the same boring old choreography for multiple different movies. Whereas this show, because it takes place during the Tong Wars in San Francisco's Chinatown, they have to make the fighting realistic, and that's by far the best thing about this show. The fight scenes were all extremely realistic and extremely entertaining to watch, especially when they start to include knives, swords, hatchets, guns, glass, and even more stuff, especially when accounting for the environment. A lot of fight scenes nowadays focus solely on, oh my god, they're fighting in an alleyway or something, so it's just fisticuffs. But when you add glass shards, throwing people through windows, off balconies, it adds a lot more realism and makes the show a lot more entertaining. I also love the pacing of the show. It never gets overwhelming, and the 10-episode stretches for seasons I think is definitely the best way to make TV shows nowadays. It feels like the perfect way to encompass everything that you want to talk about without dragging, but without cutting it off short. Shows like this are some of the reasons why I like TV shows better than movies, because unless a movie is going to be a series, a TV show will always beat the movies when it comes to character development, relationships, and world building. While watching, I really feel like I'm in Chinatown and seeing those relationships develop between Penny and her husband, Assam and Youngjun, Lee and Bill, and more, especially Lee and Bill and his wife, with that mentor and mentoree relationship. It really gets you to start liking those characters more, and especially with Bill, I think how the show portrays his relationship with Lee, the young, excited, well-mannered kid, and his wife, the soft-spoken love of his life, and the show portrays this masterfully. I haven't seen something like it before, which really made it stand out for me. I also really enjoyed the gimmick that the show used to show that Assam is the only one in the Hopway who understands English, where they start talking in Chinese to show what language they're speaking, and then it translates for us to watch. It's something that I've also never seen before. My favorite parts about the first season are just straight up the fight scenes, because the first scene focuses so much on the world building and character and relationship development. The fight scenes especially stand out, especially when including the fight scenes with Assam and them in the bar outside his town, his fight with the Yellow Demon, his fight with Leary, and of course the final fight in the boxing ring is fantastic. The most important thing though, and I can't emphasize this enough, is do not watch this show with your parents. My god, while watching this show, it said R rating in the beginning. I never really expected it to be that R rating, of course blood, gore, and all that stuff, but oh my god, almost every episode has to have a sex scene in it. After the first few times, anytime I saw two characters flirting, I'd joke to myself, yeah, they're definitely gonna have sex later. And honestly, like 80% of the time, I was right. In Season 2, everything just rises due to the treaty that the Hopway were forced to make with Assam fighting more to get better, Youngjun essentially trying to stop following in his father's footsteps because he doesn't believe it to be right, Bill working for the Chinese as a collector, Lee on drugs, Penny taking over the business, Sophie now entering the picture, her sister, Toy and her apprentice going on a murderous rampage, a new captain where Bill should have been, and honestly a ton more that I can't even mention it, or else I'd take the entire review time. And this all helps make the show extremely tense and entertaining. And another thing is, they don't normally kill that many people in this show, many main characters. So when it happens, it hits pretty hard. In Season 1, I think only one person died, but the death in Episode 6 of Season 2 was crazy and came out of left field, but it was still super impactful. And one of the few that this season used that helped properly build up the tension and honestly use it as like a release point for all that build-up. One big thing that I have to applaud this show for is its sometimes lack of dialogue. Oftentimes, when I'm watching some of these scenes in the show, I imagine, what would I do if I was put in the writer's shoes? And a lot of the times, especially during the fight scenes, I'm like, oh, you should say this. But then when I say it out loud, it just sounds super cringy. And that's one thing that this show does beautifully is, for example, when Assam is fighting Leary, every time one of them gets knocked down, honestly, I think that they're just going to say some MCU type crap where it's like, ready for round 2? Or like, okay, now I'll start trying. Or like, is that all you got? And I'm like, that's just so unrealistic. Especially in this show, they just scream and go back to fighting, which A, adds to the realism, considering if you were in an actual fight, that's probably what you would do, and B, it doesn't water down the show with cringy dialogue that's just there to fill the voids. Someone probably said that silence is louder than words, and whoever actually said that is a genius, and this show follows that to a T. Now also, after that episode, they really started transitioning into the next season nicely. They started leaving a few moments to foreshadow that third season, while also starting to answer some of our few questions. Like, for example, Young Jun's rise to the leader of the Hop Way felt natural, along with the growing tension between him and Awesome. The murder and institutionalization of two characters also helped nicely transition Buckley into the mayor role, and the help of the flashbacks help add more depth to his character since he's becoming a bigger player. Like in Season 1, he wasn't included in much conversations, but because of what happens in Season 2, he gets a bigger role, and so they have to do stuff to make him more depth, and now I really feel like I understand the character and his motivations. The transition from Otoy's fighting ways to her wanting to pull a Clark Kent and live on a farm also really helps add more depth to those characters. I know at this point, y'all are probably sick and tired of hearing me praise the fight scenes for how cool and real they look, but Otoy's fight in episode 8 especially stands out because nowadays, a lot of people will take this strong female lead and then have her beat up a bunch of dudes that are way bigger, way taller, way stronger than her just with ease. And in this show, she's like 120 pound, 5'7" girl. There's no way that she would beat a bunch of dudes that are 250 pounds, 6'5", like bodybuilders. And so in this show, she has to use her surroundings and smarts to outsmart them and kill them that way because obviously they're way stronger than her, which helps add to the realism. This show gets me so invested in the characters that when someone dies, you really feel the weight of it, which makes it hard to also kill off some of the main characters. Now, in Season 3, I like how they somehow managed to up the stakes even more and properly develop some more relationships, which is surprising because a lot of shows fail to do that nowadays. They focus mainly on world building and developing those relationships in Season 1 and 2, and then just go into more fight scenes or whatever because they feel they don't need to do that anymore in Season 3. And unlike that, this show properly continues to hammer home those relationships and honestly keep changing them with the different arcs that the characters have on their journeys. Smartly, the writers decided to end Season 2 off with a plethora of problems that makes the story progress naturally without feeling forced. Because of the extreme chaos that has been happening in Chinatown, police have doubled down to make sure the stuff is right, causing many people to be so broke they can't afford food, leading to more and more problems that Young Jun and Awesome have to solve. One thing that I can say that I didn't like was the introduction of the girls that My Ling befriends because it just feels forced. It never really goes anywhere, and like 3 episodes later, they stop talking about it. And they only bring it up in the finale for a quick 5-second clip, which I'll talk about later with one of my downsides of the show. I also don't enjoy scenes where Leary is a politician because it doesn't feel real. It's hard to feel real because normally in a trash show, he would be doing a phenomenal job. But in a show like this, when you have someone like Buckley, he just gets overshadowed as a worse version of him with some muscle. Furthermore, I can never expect what's going to happen with the show. Like, I would never have expected what would happen in episode 3, and it works because they developed the characters in place beforehand, then the event looks epic, and they continue to develop the characters in place after making an extremely entertaining scene. Also, the way that Bill slowly starts winning over his wife after Season 2 feels genuine, like a real family split for a good reason, and one of them will try to get back with the other because they know that the other's amazing, and you clearly see that he's missing her in his life. Another way that this show phenomenally deals with the power and a lack thereof is when both My Ling and Young Jun in episode 5 get imprisoned and get forced to ship out respectively. My Ling escapes easily with her connections, only spending a few hours in the prison at most, where Awesome has to do a 50-50 partnership with My Ling in order to get Young Jun and his father out. One thing that I really liked in this episode was the way that they showed Young Jun's fighting capabilities. Throughout this series, one big complaint that I sort of had was the dichotomy between Awesome and honestly everybody else. It felt like Awesome was so good at fighting that he was just basically God. And so having a scene that shows that Young Jun is also strong and he deserves a spot as leader as the Hop Way made Awesome feel less overpowered. Because normally a lot of shows would just make him like Superman, where he just is nulled by everyone else because he's so strong. But having that but showing that Young Jun's also like that strong shows that he isn't really that good. Yes, he's slightly better than everyone else, but the jump between him and some of the lower level tiers is not that high. I also love the added depth to not only Chao's character, but also to Richard's in episode 6, which clearly focuses on them and their relationships with each other, and also the other people they get to know. And I'm glad they finally resolved this Richard's wanted for murder arc, because it was good, but any longer it probably would have felt like it was being dragged, and that they would have forgotten about it. But even in focusing mainly on this relationship for the episode, they still do a really good job at alternating perspectives, so that we never get tired of it and make the other side so compelling that anybody who wouldn't like the portion still likes the other half of the episode. So like if one episode focuses on Mai Ling and you don't like that stuff, at least you have the other half of the episode focusing on Awesome to look forward to. While I'm at the topic, the final fight scenes of the season were fantastic. I know I've said this before, but I have to keep hammering home. The final ending fight scenes on episode 10 for all seasons are so fantastic and beautifully choreographed. And on top of that, the cliffhangers that the end of the seasons pose are so great that it urges you. It makes you want to continue watching because it has you gripped and you just want to see what happens next. On top of that, the finale answered a lot of questions that we had from the previous season's build-up and led even more beautifully into the cliffhanger for season 4. Honestly, with the posing questions that we've had from the previous seasons, I am willing to bet that season 4 is going to be the best out of the 4 seasons. Now, the only downsides that I have for this series are that a few of the fight scenes were clearly scripted, but I can't even knock points off because there are probably over 80 different fight scenes, and so having like 5 of them can be clearly scripted is understandable, because not every fight's going to be tip-top quality compared to especially the final fight scenes of the season. Another downside was the fact that some of the scenes just felt irrelevant to the main story or to some development of the characters. Most episodes were around 45 minutes long, but you could have easily shortened each episode to around 40 minutes and probably nothing would have changed. But once again, these gripes with the show are extremely nitpicky and minuscule, and this is an extremely fantastic show. If you like any fight scenes at all, this show is 100% worth the watch, and even if the fight scenes aren't appealing to you, the story is well worth the watch because it will have you gripped and entertained for all 3 seasons. And that's my review for Warrior Season 1, 2, and 3. If y'all like this video, hit that like and subscribe for more. Bye guys.